Hi, I'm Father Kenneth Metz. I'm a retired priest at All Souls Catholic Church in Sanford, Florida. And we're in the midst of a series on Lenten Practices and Lenten Observances. And today, we're going to talk about Shrove Tuesday. Now note where I'm standing. This will give you a hint. I'm by the reconciliation room of our parish. Shrove Tuesday, where does that come from? Well, it's the same days as other nations call Mardi-Gras or Carnival. Now, Carnival, that comes from two Latin words. It's carnis levare, which means to take away the flesh. Mardi-Gras means Fat Tuesday. They're all meaning the same thing. And that is this time of preparation before we begin the season of Lent. Why did they do that? Why was it called that? Well, getting rid of the fat and the animal byproducts and all of that in their house was what you would do those days before Lent. Now, that had a deeper spiritual significance of getting rid of our sinfulness, yes. However, this was lived out in their rules on fasting. So what they had to do was get rid of everything in their house that they would not be able to use during the season of Lent. It was not a time of debauchery. It was not a time to be of celebrating and partying. And it ended promptly, as it did, Mardi Gras does in New Orleans. It stops at midnight, and it is over. But Shrove Tuesday, what does that have to do with it? Well, Shrove Tuesday's almost got an entirely different background. Shrove Tuesday was the last day of Shrovetide. That's an English expression. Began probably in the later first millennium. We're not sure, but we know somehow or another it was attached to the practice of confession. It was around 600 when confession practices changed. It went from a public penance to a time, and a public penance, by the way, was where you would probably have to do penance outside the front door of the church and cover yourself with sackcloth and ashes. It was not a very popular thing to do. In fact, most people would put off their confession until the end of their lives. The Irish monks around 600 saw that this was not doing any good, and the church had the power to forgive sins, and so they figured out, how can we use that power? And so they started the practice of going to confessing their sins on Tuesday before Lent. Now that's a real interesting thing, isn't it? The word Shrove is, and I don't know if the sisters that taught me would remember this, I think it's a past participle, which comes from the verb to shrive. And to shrive means to cleanse away, to take away, in this case, to take away sins. So Shrove Tuesday was the day when people would come together to confess their sinfulness to the priest. In fact, I have a quote here from Theophilus, who was quoted by Abbot Elfric in the year 1000. He said, Shrovetide was described as follows: in the week immediately before Lent, everyone should go to his confessor and confess his deeds, and the confessor shall so shrive him as he then may hear by his deeds what he is to do in the way of penance. What would their penance be? Whatever you confessed would lead you to what you should do during Lent to avoid those kinds of sins. And in it was 2 weeks before Lent that they did this. And what they would do is have what we turned out to be called mystery plays in the medieval era, where they would have acting out the crucifixion and death of Jesus, so that everybody would be attuned to the fact that this was the time to stop their sinning. It was not a time for debauchery. And in fact, one last point, when the Carnival or Mardi Gras became for some people a debauched party, the church tried to restore the penitential nature of this time. In 1748, Pope Benedict XIV instituted the 40 hours of Carnival, whereby prayers were offered and the Blessed Sacrament was exposed in churches during 3 days preceding Ash Wednesday. In a letter entitled Super Bacchanalibus, man, that's a good title, huh? He granted a plenary indulgence to anyone who adored the exposed Blessed Sacrament by offering prayers and making atonement for sins. Could that be the origin of the 40 hours devotion?